All-American is probably going to be the most influence that we're gonna do in changing some ways that shows happen, like, and being a different type of show.
I think for people that feel alone or depressed or whatnot, I feel like sometimes animals are a place for them to feel, you know, loved or needed or whatnot, right? Or feel wanted.
Walking into the All-American Plant and Reptile Expo in Denver was an experience. As soon as you walk in, it looks like there's like a garden, because there's this plant vendor who brought fountains and just these gorgeous trees, things like that. And they're interspersed throughout the reptiles, and that looks really cool. When you start walking around and seeing all the different species, there were more species there, I think, than I have seen at any other show since I've started going to shows.
I originally had the idea of mixing in plants with reptile shows, and like I talked a little bit to Potter, I talked a little bit to Robin, you know, if I want Robin to start working towards stuff with that. And I talked to Potter, and it just didn't really pan out. And we had a show in Denver that was called Reptilian Nation, and Ryan runs that show and he does a really good job for bringing people through the door. But he wasn't going to be coming back because of the venue being sold that he was in. So it started to hear the rumors, and I had already been thinking about this like reptile plant combination, and I was like, man, like he's not going to come back. Like, I think this is a good idea. So Lauren and I were like, let's start looking into stuff and talking to different venues. And there's not a lot, like that's like the hardest part of show promotion, is that there's not a lot of venues that exist. And so we finally found this one in Douglas County Fairgrounds, and we were like, okay, like we want it, we're taking it. And she was like, okay, well the animals are a little bit sketchy, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, no, we promise you, like we're gonna push and we're gonna do a good job on this. And Troy was coming back through Colorado to go to Pomona, and we had breakfast, and he's like, so Ryan's not coming back? And I was like, no, you know, I guess he's just not gonna come back for it. And he said, well, like, have you thought about who's gonna put a show on? And I was like, well, I've been looking into it. And he was like, well, let me know, like I wanna help and all that. So
the whole time of really being a reptile breeder, you know, Lisa and I also have the photography studio. And in the photography world, Lisa and I were very involved in the trade show aspect of an education of photography. So I was on a state board, I was on a national board. I, you know, really had my foot in the door on running, you know, trade show aspects of photography. And from day one of going to a show, and Lisa and I were at like the first Tinley. I don't know if we've really missed one. We traveled, you know, we would, you know, Google wasn't necessarily a thing at that back in the day when we had our pet store 20 some years ago. You know, we would pick up a Reptiles magazine, and you'd look in the back and it would have the states listed. And so we'd be like, oh, let's drive to Texas for the weekend, you know, and we'd go to some all animal show. And the entire time, I think it was always on my heart that I wanted to run a reptile show. And to be 100% honest, if you know me, I'm pretty blunt. It's tough. Like in any industry, there seems to be, you know, some type of drama or bad blood and things like that. That's going to happen regardless. We're human nature, and just unfortunately it happens. From day one, even though that being on my heart, I feel like I was always very fearful of putting that foot forward, because I don't want to hurt anybody. That's when Nick and I did talk about this. I mean, that was a big part for Nick and I. Neither one of us wanted to hurt anybody. And so, you know, I'm a bit rambling, but, you know, we met shortly, would have been, oh boy, January of, you know, 2024, probably this year. We kind of finally both came to that, hey, like we had a breakfast in Colorado. I think I was on my way to Pomona to the Super Show, and we had both sort of talked about it before. And I was like, well, hey, if you're gonna do something, let me know. I'm happy to help. And you know, I'm looking at maybe doing something too. And Nick's like, yeah, you know, I'm into it, you know. And it kind of just happened.
He came out in January of this year, and then we put everything together and made a site, did all the stuff. And February 15th, we announced like we're doing the show, and then April 27th was our show day.
You know, January we talked. I think February we committed. And so we knew, and to be honest, I don't know how much Nick talked, in his interview, but when Nick talked to me, we kind of talked about doing it that fall, and I was like, no, man, I want to do it now. Like, what do they have available right now? And they had an April date, and I'm like, it's meant to be, like, we can do this. And yeah, it's scary because it was, mid-February by the time we kind of really pulled the trigger on committing. And so we literally had 2 months.
I am Nick Sloan with Sloan Reptiles and AllAmerican Reptile and Plant Expo. Getting into reptiles is a long story. I started when I was 2, snagging garter snakes out of the backyard, and my parents were like, we probably need to get him something so that he doesn't grab a rattler, he doesn't grab a bull snake, he doesn't grab something that's actually going to cause damage to a 2-year-old. So they got me a California king snake, and from there it just was everything that I would ever want. I got corn snakes and king snakes and bearded dragons and anoles and every species that was cheap enough that my parents weren't like, this is dumb, we can't get him this. But as it grew, I turned I think 12, and I won the DARE essay, and they were like, hey, you get to have a ball python. And so I went out, bought a ball python with that, and then from there it just went downhill. Like, I got obsessed, and I think in my parents' house at 12, I had a basement full of 75 different animals.
I knew who Nick was because he was this young kid, right? And and I think within our circle, it was like this, him and his brother, these 2 young punk kids, and there was always these rumors, their mom and dad were super wealthy or this or that, and there's probably a lot of jealousy within those circles when you see 2 kids as young as those 2 come into an industry buying animals they were buying. And but I didn't know him. I don't know if I really met him even until quite some time later. And Nick and I have joked about this even recently. Like, he had came to my table at Tinley talking about some snakes, and I blew him off.
First time I met Troy was at the Tinley that I took Lauren to in 2019. Funny enough, like, we were just getting back into it and all that kind of thing, and I was like, well, I have a show coming up, I don't have anything, I'm gonna try to buy wholesale from him. Troy didn't sell them to me. I don't even think I've talked to Troy about this.
So Nick and I, really kind of met, really talked while at a reptile show in Colorado. He knows Robin from Redline really well. I know Robin from Redline really well, and so he had dropped some stuff at the booth, and we kind of just got to talking and kind of hit it off. And that would be maybe my story. I don't know what Nick's story is. I'll have to maybe hear that.
Troy is one of the most genuine people in our industry, right? He's very open, he's very honest, he tells you how he's feeling, and he wants everyone to succeed. Like, he doesn't want there to be bad blood between anyone. Troy will be somebody that's like angry about something with someone. He doesn't want other people to be mistreated, but he also doesn't want there to be bad blood with him. So that's, having Troy as a business partner has been phenomenal because he is so intentional, and he has all these relationships, he has all these things built because of who he is.
Lisa and I, the people that own Animal Plastics, we'll shout out to Animal Plastics, before had a thing called Doc Stop, and it was a pet store. And they gave us a blue-tongued skink that had like a calcium deficiency or something, that had like a hump on its back. And we were like, oh, this is so cool. And then we bought like 4 iguanas, and then we bought Burmese pythons, and we bought Australian water dragons and bearded dragons. And then we got heavily into leopard geckos, and it just, and then we started a pet store, I think in 1999.
Okay.
Sounds right. And then in 2000, we had it for only a couple years. Our son was born in 2001. We got worried about, oh, we need healthcare, and we need to have real jobs and blah, blah, blah. And so a lot of pressure from the family. And so we kind of got out of that world a little bit, but we continued to breed like leopard geckos and some Burmese pythons and bearded dragons. And we did some little shows and sold stuff, just between friends and pet stores and things like that. And then it was a bit of a hiatus or whatever. We had a break, and then back into leopard geckos, and then into ball pythons, and here. So we're here.
So we had Reptic Zone is what existed when I was 12, 13, really posting my first things, pastels and spiders and butters and Mojaves and all that kind of stuff, and ballpythons.net. And then after that was Bush League Breeders Club, but the industry itself was a lot different. Okay. If you think about like high school squabbles, that was sort of what existed in the early years of ball pythons. I was in high school and I thought that it was a little high school. 2014, 2015, 2016 is when it started to shift in a different direction. I think more of like the influencer style that we have now, the big name breeders like sort of splitting a little bit more, like during that time was Bush League Breeders Club, and which doesn't exist anymore, but it was what they called it, Bush League Breeders Club, and like all the big top dogs were in the Bush League Breeders Club, like sharing stuff. I mean, I remember Oz posting a photo of the first Orange Dream and being like, hey, look at this, and everyone was like, that looks like a crappy pastel. And here we are today where Orange Dream is like one of the most notable things in this industry. So.
I wanted to do a show regardless of where to fill a void of what I was missing from, you know, our time me and Lisa had in the photography trade show world. That was something we walked away from in a negative way. Some things happened, some things were said, some bad blood happened, just like in the industry, and I needed to get away, and it took a big toll on me. And so, but I think thoroughly passionate about the trade show world. And so I desperately wanted to do, you know, something, right? So then Denver comes along and Nick and I come along and whatever, right? And then it's like, well, I really would like to do a big show.
Every show, I think, in the US has its purpose for what it does, but to do a good show that gets the most amount of people through the door that are going to be spending money with every single vendor takes a lot of work.
Nick and I, and when I say Nick and I really mean, you know, Nick, Guy, and Lauren and Lisa, but Nick and I is kind of how I always say it. We talked to a lot of reptile people, a lot of ball python people, and they kept saying the East Coast, Charlotte, you know, Virginia, like Dulles, you know, DC area, you know, and Atlanta. And so really, you know, Nick and I picked Atlanta first. And while at Tinley, we talked to Bob, and Bob's like, you know, hey, I've actually kind of been doing it. I'm looking into this too. And again, you know, Bob is a friend, right? So like we immediately shift and was like, you know, what was kind of the runner up? And it was Charlotte. You know, we had talked about Charlotte a lot.
Perfect example is Charlotte right now. Like we originally had the end of October as our show dates, and the venue double booked us, even though they had a contract signed from us and a deposit from us. And they were like, oh my gosh, like we forgot that we had a home builders show that's coming in, like all this kind of stuff. And I mean, I think we called 15 different venues across 4 different states just to be like, okay, what's close to Charlotte? What's gonna be working? Like how can we make this work? And eventually it just turned into we need to go into September, which I think works for a majority. There are sad things that didn't work out, like our vendors that couldn't make it just because of that date, but like we have to deal with that kind of stuff too. So like 2 months of push was pretty wild, like trying to get vendors that generally don't vend to trust what we're doing, and trying to put together a concept of a show that's different than just your regular everyday show.
We knew we wanted to advertise. That was a big thing. Like we didn't want to step on anybody's toes. We wanted to advertise the show really well. You know, to be honest, man, you know, Nick and I both being vendors ourselves, like we both kind of threw these ideas in a bucket of like, what would you do different? And advertising was, and I'm not saying that other shows don't advertise. You know, I always feel like these things can paint a different picture for people. But we wanted to take like a really big stance on like advertisement in every way, whether that be traditionally or new source of advertisement. And so that was something, you know, Nick and I had to jump into pretty quickly.
It takes a lot of marketing, it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of getting people to come through that door, and that's what our biggest like push was, like trusting people trusting us with the amount of money that we're asking them to spend for a show, but then also working with venues, working with marketing, working with radios, and making sure like, hey, like we have to make it all happen too. Like I can't just get people to pay for these tables. I have to take the money, put it into marketing. I have to put it into making sure the venue doesn't kick us out because we have insurance and we have fire marshals and we have this. And so it took a lot of quick maneuvering and stuff like that. So we were on the phone with Troy every single night at 9 o'clock at night, planning things for, oh gosh, an hour and a half, 2 hours every single night.
We really wanted to address, bringing in the people. And so a big part of that was where would we grab new people from? And that's where the plant aspect came in. And so again, that was a big driving force from Nick. I know nothing about plants, but I'm really enjoying them. And so I found out very rapidly just how hand in hand reptiles and plants go. So whether it's live vivariums or terrariums or whatever, or it's just you think the plants are neat, like I tell this story a lot that, Nick and I split up Colorado to talk to some people, and I went into a plant store. Guys tell me about this plant that has a white leaf and a green leaf, and I look at it like it's a piebald, ball python that has, brown saddles and white, and so I'm telling him about it, and he's telling me, well, it's a genetic process, and I'm like, it just kind of ding, right? You have that kind of ding moment, and I'm like, man, our two things really do go hand in hand. And so that brought in like just a whole nother group of people that not only were there for the plants that we had for plant vendors, but were really into wanting to learn more about the reptiles if they hadn't already. And then the reptile people that you knew you were going to kind of get, one way or the other anyways, were like, hey, this plant thing's pretty cool. And so I think we brought, not to say that plants haven't been, at some type of a show or not, but like we really addressed trying to have a good mixture of it. And so I think those two things really helped catapult, bringing in a new crowd of people that you can market to, talk to, sell to, or, whatever you want to say.
We want an event that gets put on, and I hope, and I think it worked out pretty well, but I hope Denver proved that for people, like that we had an event, we had a good time, we had fun. There were educational shows, there was influencers there were vendors from out of town that they'd never met before that were there, and I still think we'll have that as well. We'll have new vendors at the next Denver and all that kind of stuff. I mean, we try to give first right of refusal to our vendors, but like new vendors also sign up too.
I was against Nick's idea of educational shows because I feel like they died. There was something that, I think you used to see here at Daytona. There were things like that you saw at any RBC shows, and it seems like they just kind of fell off the map. And so when Nick was like, hey, I'd really like to do this, I was kind of, I don't know if that's going to work. And again, to my surprise, man, that was actually one thing we got a lot of feedback on, of happiness about people getting to, see these giant snakes and being talked about. And Chris from Epic Style did like a, thing on lychees and geckos, and kids are holding it. And so that was really neat. I think it was really neat to kind of bring that back. And so that's something we're going to try to keep going with and try to keep it well attended.
We're trying to build like a new way to work with vendors. Like as we grow, we want you to grow. Sponsor us. We're going to have you plastered everywhere. Like if you are supporting us, we're going to support you. Like if you don't want to do any of these things and you come to the show and you sit down and don't move and don't talk to people and they don't buy from you, like I don't want to like be the one to blame for it. We want to change the market a little bit for that too. Like this is a marketing opportunity for you. Talk to people, jump up, talk to people, be in their faces a little bit, but like this is your business. This is your livelihood. I hear people all the time, like at a show, like this is my livelihood. A show's money needs to be good for me to make my livelihood. I'm like, then let's make it your livelihood.
Being a vendor myself and Nick being a vendor, what do we want differently? And so, load-ins, that's part of it. We want people through the door, and we want that mix to be the right mix. And And I think, talking to our friends, Josh and Chris and Joe at JSA and, a lot of those guys, like, what do you guys want out of us? And I think the most common thing is, if they're giving up time to set up, then be on their feet all day, carting animals across the country, like, I think overall, most of them would tell you that dollars need to be involved. And at the same time, a lot of those guys recognize the marketing value of the people. And so I think what we were told most is we want more people, right?
Let's work together. Let's do marketing. Like for me, for AllAmerican at least, we decided like we're not against any other show. Like we're not gonna come in and step on anyone's toes. We're trying to find areas that like need a different type of show, because we're a different type of show. We're reptiles and plants, so we're not like, hey, we're just throwing together a reptile show and you get to come spend money and that's it. Like we're throwing together a reptile and plant show, we're throwing educational shows, we're doing giveaways, we're doing all that kind of stuff through the show. So we don't want to come in and step on anyone's toes. So we're like, let's choose places strategically that work well so that everybody can keep working together. And like, there's Mr. Critter's Reptile Expo up in Wyoming, and we're a sponsor of Mr. Critter's Reptile Expo. Like, we want him to succeed too. And he's 2 hours away from where we are. So like, that's our biggest like, hey, how do we move through all this kind of stuff? How do we fit this all in? And figuring it out in 2 months was like stressful, but also good. We got it all figured out, and the show worked out really well, I think, especially a blizzard. Like people actually showing up and being there was great. Like that's awesome. And now Charlotte seems to be growing really, really well. Vendors is who we're trying to convince out here. Most of them don't even know who we are, so that's the hardest part of this one, but I think we'll get there. The elephant in the room is always ball pythons. People walk through a show that are not a ball python hobbyist. They're pissed about the number of ball pythons. I think even in Denver, I think we had 15 ball python breeders, and we got comments that there were too many ball pythons.
People accuse every show of being a ball python show. I think if people are honest with themselves, I mean, ball pythons drive the reptile market. It may not have been that way at one point, in my mind. In my mind, there was so many lizards and things at one point, and I thought that was really neat. And there was a handful of ball pythons, right? But ball pythons just rapidly, became successful. And so I think the thing you hear in a negative tone, which it's unfortunate, is that, it's another ball python show. I think the answer to that is, slow down. I think if you go to any show and really look at people's tables, you'll find that there's things there that you've never seen before. I think we all get in a bit of a hurry.
I think we're gonna max out on a number of ball python vendors for Charlotte. I think it's probably gonna be 30, and we could have 250 vendors. So, we can't be too picky though. Like we do have to sell the spaces, but if you don't make money, and if there's 75 ball python vendors at a show, they're all gonna sort of spread out amongst all of them. They're all gonna be like, I made $1,000. Like I'm not doing your show again. So it's a tricky thing to figure out of like the percentage that's gonna work well for everybody.
When we started breeding, we did not realize how daunting it was to get into the bigger shows. We started breeding and we would tell people like, oh, I think we're gonna wait a couple years until we vend like X big show. And people were like, yeah, because you can't get into them. We had no idea how exclusive it could be, especially for something like ball pythons, where there are a lot of specifically ball python vendors. A lot of people have different ways to get into the bigger shows that aren't just sitting on the wait list. Some people delve into other species, some people know somebody, borrow a table, things like that. I think it is pretty difficult to get into a bigger show as a ball python breeder by just waiting on the wait list to get in.
We have to think about like more than just like the hobbyists, right? Like all of us that are on Facebook or on Discord or all that kind of stuff, we're all talking to each other, and you know, this is what I think about the shows, and this is what I think about the shows. Well, there is a vast majority that don't post anything about any of it. They show up to the show and they want to buy a corn snake for their son. They want to buy a cage. They want to do that. Like, those people are the ones that I have to like think, okay, what are they going to think when they walk in? Because those are the ones that hopefully still come back. But if they're not a hobbyist and they're like, there's 75 ball python people here, I don't care about ball pythons. I'm not coming back to your show. I don't want a ball python show. Like, I want to bring my kid and see a giant rock iguana and take a photo with it. I want to see a giant reticulated python and take a photo with it. So that's like how our diversity, we try to think about it. And like, I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to a bunch of different species and all that kind of stuff. So like, I'm like, also, I really want these species there. And I think Troy's starting to become more of a nerd with all of it. So he's also on the board with me of like, okay, let's find this weird little guy that breeds this and that. So Denver had a really good diversity. We're hoping that we can keep that trend with Charlotte, and we're the ones that decide really at the end of the day on who's in and who's not. So like, if we get a vendor request and we're like, okay, we can't do another ball python guy, they go on a wait list, and we feel terrible about it. I don't want to put a person on a wait list, especially like if we're announcing that we have tables from the show to still fill, but we have to keep the diversity or else it's more complaints than we'd love to have.
You know, animals in general, I think for a lot of people, I think for people that feel alone or depressed or whatnot, I feel like sometimes animals are a place for them to feel, you know, loved or needed or whatnot, right? Or feel wanted. I think that they help people in a tremendous way. Again, whether that's dogs or cats or reptiles or whatever, you know, for me, it's really both. I think there's people out there that I've met recently that get that same feeling from plants, you know, and I think it's interesting, right? Because it's a plant, right? And you just water it, but there's people that just really pour all their love into these plants.
A lot of plant people really like aeroids. So like your philodendron, your monstera, your pothos for easiest for everyone to understand, or epipeperum, and they are very into those. And that's what a lot of people sell. And a lot of these plant shops just sell a lot of this same stuff. So if we do have a huge mix, and like, I'd love to see 30% be strictly plants, but we want them all to do well. I don't want them to come in and it's like, this is ridiculous. We're all competing each other and doing a bad job. So like Denver, the way that we worked it out there, we didn't have as many plant vendors as we wanted, but it's a harder sell. Like, this is a new thing to them. They've not done these trade shows. They have a lot of plant pop-ups. They do that kind of thing, but it's never been something that's this big. And so we had these, I think we had, how many vendors we have? 5 full plant vendors, 6 like with some with animals and that kind of stuff in Denver, and we have 92 vendors in Denver. So our percentage-wise there was way lower than I think I wanted it to have been, but Denver's also a frozen desert, so we don't have a huge tropical plant thing. But when we brought those people in, like, I talked to Tagawa Gardens, who's one of our vendors, and I was like, hey, I want you to come in. I don't want you to step on everyone. I don't want you to just be this massive giant that just squashes the hobbyist vendors. And so we brought them in, and I told them, like, hey, this is what you should bring. And they did exactly that. They brought everything that I said that they probably should bring, and they brought on some other stuff and that kind of thing, but they didn't bring anything that was going to overcompete with the vendors that have like specialty monstera, specialty philodendron, and that kind of stuff. And at Denver, like, the mix worked really, really well, and they all did really good. They sold out on Saturday. They sold most of their stuff on Sunday. They like went back to their shops and got more things just to be able to sell more. They were all very happy, and that's all I wanted. Was I want everyone in here to make money, because if you don't make money and you don't come back, like, there's no show. So in Charlotte, I'd love to see like a 30% because we do have a bigger plant market down here. A lot more people that are able to do a little bit more outside and that kind of thing. And Florida right down the road, like we've already had some vendors from Florida that are like, I'm coming up to your show, like I want to do this, and which is really cool because there's, of course, a date interference with the International Aeroids Society show that's in Miami, and that, like, for them to not be doing that and coming to our show is like, okay, like I appreciate your support, I appreciate your trust, and like, let's make this a big thing.
While the big reptile that we got into was ball pythons, we obviously love all kinds of reptiles, and getting to see them at the shows and having people who are incredibly knowledgeable about these animals talking to us about them, teaching us about the care and what is required to bring them home, it makes me want more of these species. It makes me want to learn more about them. In this past year, we have brought a couple other species home, and I think that if they weren't present at shows, we wouldn't have gained knowledge, interest, the ability to bring them back home. I really like diversity in the reptile shows.
Carpets, green trees, chameleons, those things I think need a lot more representation in the industry. Obviously, carpet pythons had sort of a pitfall during like the Nido beginning days, like killing everything off. So need more of those guys, need more green tree breeders, like actual breeders that I'm not just gonna have a bunch of wild caught, captive hatched green trees. One of our biggest, like this was the saddest like one that happened for, at least for me, I was like, oh dang it. Like Nick Botany of Cold Blooded Earth was excited to do the show in October and all that kind of stuff, and then the dates don't work for September. So that one was like a big one for us. I was like, oh, dang it. Like I was like, really happy to have that blood python breeder because that's awesome. We have a bit of an issue, like not an issue, but like a hurdle that we are trying to figure out how to actually even talk about it with North Carolina, but no one calls. So Mecklenburg County doesn't want 8-foot snakes. No one will call me back. There's nothing legally like written out anywhere that I can find online that says specifically like, nope, you can't own them in Mecklenburg County. So what I think we're gonna do is approach it like this. If someone wants to breed berms or anything like that and they wanna bring them, we're gonna say, well, you just bring your proof you don't live in Mecklenburg County, and then when people buy them, prove that they don't live in Mecklenburg County. That's, I think, the best way to do it, because it's just a law that just says you can't own them in Mecklenburg. It's like, great, then it's not Mecklenburg. So that's how I think we're gonna approach that one. We have to deal with an organization in Denver called PACFA that is a lot more strict than what I'm hearing out here in North Carolina, and they're fairly easy to deal with. So I think we can walk through that very easily. The biggest comment I see on other shows, not necessarily ours, on posts is that last time I was at this show, no one let us hold a thing, and I don't want to come back. Trust me, I get it. Like most of us have these animals, there's a lot of money put into them. There's some species that like you need to tell them no, right? Like you can't just have everybody holding it. But I think there needs to be a little bit more like interaction with the public of, hey, I have this one. It's designated for holding that kind of stuff. And trust me, it's scary because like you don't know what diseases, what other things are out there. So hand sanitizer at your tables, that kind of thing. Like if we can interact with those people, and then we have to give them post-show support, right? We can't think of them as they just bought a pet. You have to think about them as like, they're gonna be my future customer. And this 10-year-old is gonna buy a normal ball python, his family's gonna take care of it. And then there's so many people in this industry you can talk to that they're like, yeah, I bought a snake for my kid and now I own 75 ball pythons, and like, then help foster that.
I think to grow the reptile hobby, the reptile industry, what we really need to do is teach people outside of the reptile industry about these animals. When they come to a show and they're not interested in buying, please don't ignore them. Teach them about the animals that they're interested in seeing. You don't have to let people hold your animals. I know biosecurity is a huge thing that everybody talks about, but share the knowledge, share the information that you have, share why you love these animals, and bring more people into a niche that some people are honestly afraid of. Show them why they shouldn't be afraid. Don't be running after somebody with a snake, or don't tell people that your animal's going to bite you if you take it out. Give them the information about it, teach them about what you have and what you love about these animals, and it is going to inspire more and more people to take up caring for them as a hobby.
Go learn how to take care of this stuff. And we're doing it for both sides. We're not doing it just for the reptile, we're doing it for the plant as well. How many reptile folk here have went to Home Depot, bought a plant, killed it in 2 weeks, and they're like, nope, I'm done now. Yeah, like Troy will be the first to tell you, he's like, I kill all the plants that I have, and now he's starting to get it. And he's like, got the bug, and he's going out and buying plants. Sorry, Troy. And you got to try to make money at the shows, not spend it all on plants.
The plants specifically, you know, like when you're going to a reptile show, you might not be ready to bring a reptile home. Like it's a big commitment to bring an animal that's going to live 30 years home. You have to be ready for it. But a plant you could bring home and do research after you've brought it home without worrying that it's going to die. I'm going to anger the plant people. They're going to be like, you need to research your plant before you buy it.
I hope that like what we foster with our vendors and our vetting of our vendors is that they're coming in and they want to grow the industry instead of just like, well, unless you're buying this, I don't want you to touch it. And like, I do that with like certain animals. Trust me, that's not a wrong thing to do. If someone asks to hold the one $5,000 snake on there, you're like, hey, guess what? This one feels the exact same way. I promise. They just look slightly different. I know it's cool. That's why I breed them. But like, let's have you hold this. But you'll also find out like sometimes those people are actually wanting to buy those things. Just be there. Be excited to sell to people. Be happy that someone wants to buy from you. Like even if it's $20, that's someone taking. And this is the best way that I've ever thought about it. And I heard about this a long time ago. But you have to think that if someone spends $20 with you, likely that's almost 2 hours of work for them. Even an hour. That's an hour of their hourly wage. They're like, I'm going to spend it with you. And then you multiply that. If you multiply it to the person that has 10 snakes and they spent $500, that could be a week of their wages. RBC is amazing. Like going to Tinley is fantastic. We don't want to be Tinley. I want to be AllAmerican. I want to be a different type of show. Like Daytona is a fun show. Like we want to be a different type of show. And I think so far that we've done that. Hopefully, you know, September Denver, September Charlotte, April Denver. They all do the same thing.
I would obviously love if the AllAmerican show became a huge success and became national level show. I know that they have several different locations that they're traveling to, so I don't know which one's going to be the biggest one. I would love if it was the one closest to us. But going to Denver was really incredible, and I would go out again. I can't say what it's going to be in the future. I really hope that Nick and Troy have all the success in the world. I hope that people continue to come out to these shows and see the beauty in the plants, the beauty in the animals, and that the more people that try really hard to make it a great show, the more people will be coming in to, you know, expand on that.
In the next 5 years, and it's growing faster than I think I ever thought that it would. I would like to max out at like 4 locations and 2 shows a year. I think that would give the feel of more of a event, a luxury show, for people to bring their high-end stuff and to be excited about it and all that kind of thing. And I don't want to diminish on the work that we put into it because we oversaturate ourselves. And obviously every business grows. Like being on the business side of things, business will always need to grow with people. And if that was the case with this, and I still don't think we'd go over 8 shows a year because I think we would lose the value that we've given it. And I want people to be excited about it. I don't want it to be like, okay, there's another one. Like, what's the point of this? I do want the next generation of reptile keepers to just not only come from us, right? My daughter already loves snakes and things like that. Like that's gonna happen. But I want it to be like these new people that have no idea and then they just fall in love with it.
I would like to think that AllAmerican would be a safe place, right? Like, are we gonna make everybody happy? No, that's an unfortunate reality, and one that I don't live with very well. But I would like to think that, you know, AllAmerican is truly a safe place for people to come and grow and find community, you know. And if you're coming to an AllAmerican show and you don't know how to do that, you come find me. I'll take you by the hand, and we're gonna meet some people.
If you walk up to me and you bought a $20 snake from me, I hope that I took all the time that you hoped that I would take with you to buy that $20 normal ball python, because it's easy for us to forget.